Welcome to Your Future in Sales and Marketing, a podcast that helps you make great career decisions to get the most out of your career journey. We'll introduce you to the AXR network of established senior leaders and a handpicked group of future aspiring leaders who have it all in front of them. You'll learn what it's like in the top job and how to get there. Your hosts from AXR's specialist sales and marketing recruitment team will also land bonus episodes for you on how to work with recruiters, write a resume, and smash an interview, as well as our very popular market updates. It's the podcast that has it all. You can't get this career advice anywhere else.
So welcome to our series of how-tos, which we are bringing to you from the Pro Podcast Studio. My name's Amelia. I am a consultant with AXR and I focus on brand and marketing roles. And I'm joined by my colleagues.
I'm Amanda. I do finance and accounting recruitment.
And I'm Zara and I do finance and accounting recruitment as well, more on the chartered accounting side.
Beautiful. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to talk about a very important topic on how to resign. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask a few questions and we'll go through a bit of a discussion. But essentially, we think this is a really important one. We talk to candidates all day long about a variety of reasons as to why they might be considering making a move. So let's start there. What do you both think? Maybe I'll throw over to you first, Amanda. What's the top reason that a candidate might be thinking of resigning from their current role?
Yeah, I think it's a funny one because we speak to people who are sometimes just having a bad day and they're like, I'm done, I'm out of here. And then others who have been thinking about it for a really long time. So there's definitely a range of reasons. The obvious one is just sort of wanting a new role and then obviously delving deeper into what that would look like. So whether it's that they want more progression opportunity that they're not seeing, they want to move into a different area of their skill set that they're not getting access to in their current role. Or it could be like a cultural reason that they're not necessarily fitting in, they're not clicking with their manager as they'd hoped.
Definitely. And I think to add to that, it's probably at the core what Amanda said. It's generally someone wanting a career progression opportunity, or it's something that's not offered within their current firm, whether it's a pay rise, a new opportunity, moving in accounting, for example, from financial control into more commercial finance or FP&A, things like that. But then I think it also goes down to, look, people might have their own personal issues, health, family reasons, things like that. It's a very, very circle of life things. Like you always have to accept a job offer and then you always have to eventually resign to go elsewhere. So it's something very common and there's a number of reasons behind it.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes, it could be progression, but it could also be a jump in industry, jump in focus. Something that we've been talking about a lot in the office is that progress in your career is not linear. It can be up and down, back and forth, sideways, diagonally. Yeah. So I think it's important to think about the whole scope. But perhaps, as you mentioned at the start, sometimes when you're just having a bad day, it's really important to really scope out what that might look like and really sit down and consider holistically what that looks like. So I think having conversations with us might be a good way of really, grounding yourself and reconsidering. But what other advice would you give to someone who's perhaps thinking about making a move? Zara, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Like I said, it's, everyone has to start somewhere and finish somewhere. I think it's a lot of the time, going back to that point, sometimes you have a bad day and go, I don't want to go to work, or I'm over this and what else is out there. I think the advice from our perspective and what we see is, firstly, consider where you're at. Was it just a bad day? Have you been there for a while? What's your kind of context? I think then sometimes it's worth chatting to someone internally within the business, whether it's you've got a good relationship with your manager and saying, hey, I'm struggling with this because I don't, maybe I don't understand it, or I feel that I'm not challenged enough, or I'm ready for a promotion, or even going home to family and having that conversation saying, I'm not sure about where I'm at with everything.
Yep.
And then exploring what options look like, firstly, internally, externally. And like you mentioned, it might be moving, to a totally new industry or even a new career path that's open to you.
Yep.
I think considering firstly where you're at and then where you can go and what's viable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I often, I don't know if this makes me a good recruiter or a bad recruiter, but I often say to people, what are your options internally?
Yep.
Those conversations actually end with, before we have our next conversation, make sure you follow through on X, Y, and Z, whether it's having a conversation with your manager, finding a mentor within the business that can help you navigate internally first. I think a lot of people underestimate the value of moving internally. You often get better opportunities internally because you've already built a brand. People know what your work ethic is like. They know what you're good at from seeing you within the business. And sometimes the best jumps upwards or even into a new area of skill set, they're always going to be a leap of faith because you don't know whether you can do something until you're in the position to do it. And sometimes the business that you're in are the best people to give you that chance. There's always the case of you don't know what you've got until you've lost it. And there are many people that we know that do make those decisions to leave and then come back to us and say, oh, I wish I would have, thought about it a bit more or given it another chance or taken more internal opportunity. So we do, even though it is our jobs to place people in new roles, we are often having conversations where we actually are convincing them to stay or at least reconsider their options before they decide to take that plunge.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And if anyone is unsure and, you've exhausted all of your friendship networks and your internal team, perhaps, feel free to reach out to your friendly recruiters. We are happy to have that chat and we'll give you really unfiltered and honest advice. Okay, so you've gone through that process, you've made the decision, and making a move is definitely what you want. What's your top piece of advice then in terms of how to actually have that conversation? And I guess, what's the next step?
Yeah, when I have somebody who's ready to have that conversation, the two things that I always sort of try and set them up for to feel as confident as they can going into that conversation is, number one, to settle their nerves. This is a conversation that people have every day. If we think about how often we move roles personally, like for some people in their lifetime, they'll only have 3 different jobs maximum, for example. That's quite scary to have that kind of conversation. It's a very high pressure conversation that you've only really going to have 3 times. Remind yourself that people resign from jobs for all different reasons every day. And the person that you're having that conversation with and resigning to, they've had to have that conversation themselves. They've resigned from jobs before. They've had other people resign to them before. So just remind yourself that this isn't a personal decision as such. It's a business decision for yourself. You just have to sort of go in there and say, this is just an ordinary conversation. I just have to do this. The other thing that I do often go through with candidates before they're resigning is talking to them about like the different case scenarios, and not to just sort of have them fear the worst, but think about like, what do you think they might say? And then all the different options of what they might say back, then you can sort of have an idea up your sleeve of how you would tackle that particular obstacle.
Beautiful. So have a bit of a plan.
Yeah. And just sort of try and anticipate how they might react. Don't go in there anticipating that they're going to bite your head off, because then obviously you'll be terrified to go in. But you just want to approach the conversation as rationally and level-minded as you can.
Yeah.
You're not breaking up with them as a friend. You can, stay in touch with them. You're not doing anything like that. You're just saying like, this isn't right for me anymore, and I've made a decision to go elsewhere.
So if that conversation, goes well, but your hiring manager decides to counteroffer, and if for those who don't know what that term means, it's perhaps bumping up your salary or providing a new benefit to try and keep you in the role. Zara, do you have any advice as to what you would do in that situation?
Completely. And I think it's a good point, Amelia. Like we've heard or we've seen it a lot, and definitely increased over the last, call it 12 or 18 months, what we call, the counteroffer. I think it's really important to consider, and I think you've got to go back and before you go into that conversation to resign, reflect on like your reason for leaving or your reason for moving on. Whether it's salary or promotion that they couldn't offer, or that they haven't offered you for quite some time, or whether it's something, a personal reason, or look, there's a number of factors. But I think you've got to prepare for that conversation. If you're going into that, you need to go into the conversation not going just to catch up with your manager or your boss. You need to go in knowing that you've got a purpose behind it. You're going in to resign and you're moving on to a next opportunity or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important to note that if they come back to you and say, oh, okay, but look, they're offering you another, 20K more than we could pay. Okay, we'll match it, or we'll pay you an extra 25 or 30K. They weren't able to offer you that in the first place. They weren't able to necessarily see your worth. Or if it's another benefit, okay, now we'll finally give you the work from home and the increase, whether it's maternity leave or factors like that. there was nothing there in the first place, you were unhappy, it didn't work for yourself, you've got to really consider why you're having this conversation. And now that they're suddenly, for lack of a better word, crumbling a little bit, I think, the main thing is consider where you're at, and there's always a purpose behind this conversation.
And will it actually resolve the issues you've been having?
Yeah. And I think it's really flattering. Mm-hmm. Like, when you threaten to leave and someone's begging you to stay, like that's a really nice position to be in. But I think, as you've just said, Amelia, as well, like, is 20K more going to make you hate your boss any less? Probably not. You're just earning a little bit more money while you're hating them. And I think, as Zara has said as well, like, do you want to work for someone that it takes threatening to leave, that they finally realize how valuable you are? Or would you prefer to be in an environment where they're acknowledging your value and rewarding it as you go, rather than having to have a conversation like that? I think it comes back as well to the beginning of understanding your motivations. If you think that money really is your driver, it's easier for you to stay and try and get more money. It's also cheaper for the business to keep you by paying you a bit more. Like, it's very expensive for a business to go out to market, to find a replacement, to spend 6 months training them up as well. So it's in their best interest sometimes to just offer you more money to try and keep you.
Yeah.
So that's why if I'm speaking to someone and the first thing they say to me is, I just really want more money, I say to them straight up, okay, before we go any further, find out if there is any way that you can get more money where you are, because to go through that whole process, it's emotionally draining going through all of those interviews. It takes up a lot of our time trying to help you. And then to just go through that to get the more money that you potentially could have without all of the fuss in between.
And I think to that point too, it's like a lot of the time we've seen money doesn't, like you said, solve problems, Amanda. We've seen people move or get counteroffered, accept the counteroffer, stay at their current business and go, okay, perfect. It was money that I was going for in the first place. This isn't that bad. But then go, okay, actually there was a reason that I was leaving in the first place.
And then come and chat to us 12 months later.
Yeah, or even sooner. And they're like,
So true.
Just wasting, their own time, and they go, I could have progressed, could have had a new opportunity, could have changed things when I wanted it and had it in front of me, and waste a little bit of their time and probably their current employer's time and, the business they were going to.
Beautiful. Well, I think that's been a really good chat about how to resign and perhaps how not to resign as well. So thank you, ladies, for having that open, honest conversation with us today. What would be final piece of advice for someone, or even just summarizing, someone wanting or thinking about starting to resign? Amanda?
I would say to go in really resolute, like know what you're going in there for. Make sure that this is a last resort. For you. Cover all your bases, have a really hard think within yourself, like, what are my motivating factors? How can I potentially resolve some of those issues without having to have this conversation? But then when you are ready to have that conversation, know exactly what you're trying to get out of that conversation.
Have a plan.
Don't be swayed, and stick to the plan.
Beautiful. And Zara?
Yeah, and to add to that, on a different note, I think go into that conversation. Before you go into that conversation, be sure and certain about it. Be sure that you do want to resign and know that you're making the right move. So in terms of doing that, have a conversation, whether it's, someone else within the business or even just your partner or friends or family, someone that you can go, hey,
or a recruiter.
What is this decision?
We're here.
Or your recruiter. Exactly. And once you have that conversation, be sure about it. Then go in and just be completely honest and open. And I think the last thing to consider is go and have that conversation. No one's going to completely hate you.
Yeah.
Never burn those bridges too. You never know when you're going to need them or come back, and
beautiful.
Be final with it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And thanks to our listeners for joining us today.
Awesome.
Hope you've enjoyed the how-to series, and there'll be more episodes coming.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast from AXR Recruitment and Search. We're passionate about helping you get the most out of your sales and marketing career. Keep listening as we bring you more career insights and advice from Australia's inspiring sales and marketing leaders. See you next time on Your Future in Sales and Marketing.